I am Maria Feith, Director for SkillsCommons in Merlot, two powerhouses in open educational resources. And I'm joined today by Jeff Kahn. Jeff is someone that I look to for guidance in business. He's somewhat of a mentor for me and for other members of our team. We've worked with Jeff pretty consistently over the last, 10 or 12 years. He's a software industry veteran and technology consultant. He spent 40 years in companies from a few people to hundreds of thousands, from startups to very mature ones like IBM and Microsoft. For educational institutions such as MIT, Harvard Business School publisher, and the California State University. He worked in many roles, including software development, management, international coordination, training, marketing, and sales. And as a consultant, Jeff worked on over 100 engagements for companies in the educational technology ecosystem. So a lot of good background work and expertise that he brings to the table. Jeff recently published a collection of work that is well suited to support early career professionals with practical techniques to identify, analyze, and thrive in common business situations. Thank you for being here, Jeff. Tell us a little bit about your collection of articles called Strategies for the Workplace. What is this collection all about, and what were you trying to achieve and why?
Yes, well, Maria, as you said, we know each other well, and thank you for agreeing to host me on this broadcast. The origin of these materials came from an observation I had that experience is what you have just after you need it. Now, I know that sounds a little glib, but it's actually true. What normally happens is you have an experience, you learn something from it, and then you apply it the next time. Now, the problem with that model, or the challenge with that model, is that it would have been nice to have that experience the first time, before you needed it, so that when you entered that situation, you could take the fullest advantage. So let me explain that a little bit about, imagine you're an early career professional and you're in a meeting, and you haven't had that much experience in the workplace, and something comes up in the meeting. A term is used, a request for suggestions is made to the group. There's some kind of dynamic going on, and you're not familiar with this word or this concept or this business situation. So what happens? Well, normally you just keep quiet. You can't participate very much. You're listening, you're learning, you're gaining experience, but since you don't have the experience yet, you tend to be hesitant to engage. Maybe you're afraid you'll say the wrong thing or whatever it is, but you tend to pull back. And you wait, and then later maybe you look into this topic. Now there's another group of people in the meeting, maybe those with some experience, who can actually contribute. They know about the topic, they are following all the terminology and so on, and so they are more active, effective participants. And then there are the people who are actually leading things, more experience, more confidence, and so on. And in an early career, you're often being looked at to see if you have potential for management, for become a team leader, shift supervisor, fast track to executive, and so on. So there's a little bit of healthy competition among all the new people. And those people who show more command, who can participate more fully, who are more poised because they're more confident, because they're more experienced, tend to shine in those situations. So I wanted to give that, which I call the early career advantage, to people so that they could benefit and they wouldn't be sort of one meeting, one engagement behind. So what happened is I created a couple of hundred articles. And the way that came about is my daughter graduated college and I wanted to help her have that early career advantage. So I said to her, this is stuff you're likely to run into in the business world. I'll coach you through it. I'll give you something to think about, reflect on before you need it. And then when you need it, you'll look that much more confident and poised, and that will accelerate your career. So the next logical thing you might ask is, well, what kind of topics do I cover? So one thing is uh, I talk about clear and effective communication. And with all of these subject areas, there's an adjective. So I talk about, clear and effective communication, because it's not just how to communicate, right? People know how to do that. The question is, are you clear about what you're saying? Is it effective? Meaning, is it producing the correct response with your audience, right? So you can say things, but if they're not clear, if they're not effective, you don't have the tools to do that, then what happens is you've communicated, but you haven't actually advanced your goals, and you've kind of wasted your time and so on. Another thing I call this structured decision making, right? People can decide, doesn't take much to do that. Well, the question is, do you have a structure for your decisions? Do you have a method for your decisions? Do you just sort of make them, or do you make them, sort of following a model with a purpose and so on? The next one is analytical problem solving. So again, you can solve problems, but are you doing it analytically? Are you doing it thoughtfully? Are you doing it in a way that's likely to yield, a good result? Another one is teamwork and collaboration. People want you to do that, but I talk about productive teamwork and collaboration. And the reason there is, again, you can be part of a team, you can be involved in some kind of collaboration, but will it actually work? Will the team function well? Will the collaboration be effective in producing, what it's supposed to? Another category is efficient time management. Again, we all manage our schedules, but there are ways to do that that are more efficient, more effective, likely to produce better results than others. The last two are what I call operative technical literacy, which means you can know a bunch of stuff, but can you actually use it? Is it something you can apply and functionally in your situation? And again, this is for a broad audience, so the topics I chose, which had to do a little bit with finance and business areas, were for that, right? There's lots of technical jargon that you'll need that's beyond the scope of what I did. And the last one was what I call adaptability, resilience, coping. And that has to do with your ability to adapt. And that has come up a couple of times pretty recently. One that people will know is COVID, right? So COVID came, swirled everything around. People were working remotely. Lots of relationships changed, roles changed, and so on. So you needed to figure out how to deal with that. And that presented a lot of challenges for how you would adapt to that. Another one, which is more emerging since COVID is somewhat in the past now, is AI. AI seems to be changing everything. So again, this model of something's going to come up and you need to be able to adapt to it is part of it. So those are the subjects that I chose to cover.
So many of the words that you're using are tossed around as a given, and it's like, but at what point are we truly taught how to be productive, a productive team member, how to be an effective communicator? We don't always get those kind of seemingly obvious needed lessons. And so I think that this collection helps to address that and pretty quickly without this long, drawn out kind of arduous approach to it. It gives us the skill sets in a almost in a simulation format. A lot of us learn as we go when it comes to nuances of being a professional, right? I mean, we make so many mistakes. So what do you think the benefit is of spending time thinking through this level of content before, like you gave it to your daughter and said, here, we don't know when you may experience some of this, but what's the benefit of her having the opportunity to think through some of these things beforehand?
Right. Well, there were two facets of that. One is how was this material used sort of in teaching? And the model there was that these articles, which are short, they're maybe a page and a half, there may be a 3-minute if you listen to a podcast episode. So they're bite size, right? It's not a big thing. It's not a whole course. It's not a whole book. It's something you could digest certainly in one sitting. But students were asked to look at that, pick one, read it, reflect on it, and then summarize it and present it back to their peers, maybe in the form of a one-page PowerPoint, one slide, or a short email or something like that. So there's this pattern of you're going to begin something to absorb. In my case, generally read it or listen to it. So if something's going to happen, you're going to have to be able to summarize that. That's a skill you need all the time in the workforce. You have to be able to be to find what are the key concepts in anything you've been exposed to and net that out for other people. And actually, as you move up the communication toward the top of the organization, particularly a hierarchical one, they tend to want less and less information. They want it netted out. They want to know the bottom line. They say, just net it out for me. Just tell me what's the key takeaway. There's another thing sometimes called a completed work or a kind of work where the person is only being asked, the manager is only being asked to approve or not. They don't need all the background. They assume you've done all that. They have all of that analysis if they want it, but they just want to know sort of what to do. So the summarizing task is very important, and you benefit from practice like you do from anything else. And then the last one is to present it. So you have to compose the presentation, which is a skill, and then you have to speak in public, which is something that a lot of people are hesitant to do, but is critical. And in fact, I think one of the skills that can accelerate your career professionally, since most people don't want to talk in public, if you're willing to do it, you'll get picked to do it, you volunteer to do it, and you will be exposed to more opportunities faster because the person who's speaking is often then asked follow-up questions and taken aside and followed up and stuff like that. So that's one thing. And then just the act of thinking, a little bit like investing in your career every once in a while, sometimes called bulletproofing your career. People are told you should spend a certain amount of time every week building your network on LinkedIn or things like that. Well, I think this practice of reflecting, thinking about things, when it isn't in the moment, when it is more of an investment in your professional development, it can be a good practice. And so I think that's the other part of sort of brain training here that you get by, say, reading one of these yourself once a week as part of your own self-directed professional development, whether it was assigned by a mentor or you just, or you're part of some group at a company that decided to do it collectively, or you're doing it, on your own.
So similar to muscle memory for, let's say, athletes. I mean, you play like you practice. And so being able to kind of go through those simulations and think through how it might play out can be pretty beneficial in my experience with these pieces for sure. And Jeff, how did your daughter, I know we're off the script just a little bit, but I'm very interested in how your daughter approached this, and did she work through it on her own? Did she spend time with a study buddy? I mean, how did she choose to use these pieces?
Well, it turns out that's a timely question. So my daughter's now on her second job. So she graduated college, she had a first job, almost 3 years, now is in the second job. And one of the things that she was asked to do, and as part of sort of new hire things, was to tell people something about herself and that they might find interesting. So she said, well, my father wrote a book about these, sort of business nuggets. And there was some interest by a couple of the other people in the new hire cohort. And so one of those people bought the book and said, oh, this is great. Let's see what we do. So they bought the book. Now, they only bought one copy, and they photocopied articles for each other. But anyway, they started to meet once a week, and they call it Talk Around. And what they do is, I think there's 4 of them. they get together, they pick two articles each week, one of them, they're going in a rotation, and then they think about them and they talk about them, during the preceding days. And then the purpose is to say, well, do we agree with this? Do we not? Have we run into this situation? How might we handle it? And I think she's actually enjoying that, and that's building a sort of peer rapport. Uh, Prior to that, she said sometimes the material was very timely, right? Just before she needed it. Some of the material she recognized was not yet relevant, but at least she had, was familiar with it and could refer back. And more of that had to do with, say, the things that are related to when you're a first line manager. Describe a situation, and then I usually have a sort of a key takeaway. So if you didn't want to read any further, or you just wanted to know the key thing, I kind of put a box around that and have that be just a one sentence sort of key idea. Then I have a sort of an application section where I go into more detail about how this situation might come up and equip you with tools to deal with it. So the tools might be questions that you should ask, things you should consider before doing this. So you could imagine being in a meeting or being part of a group and having looked at these questions and be able to say, well, have we thought about this? Have we asked ourselves that? Might we run into this situation, and so on? So there's a sort of almost like a checklist of things that you can be thinking about. And then sometimes these are more scenarios, not so much questions as things that may happen or dynamics that may be unfolding. And if you recognize them, then you can, respond to them rather than just react. And then usually at the end, I will, if it's relevant, talk about how your manager might use this circumstance or how you might want to use it should you be a manager. And so even if the topic, that topic, isn't relevant yet, you can actually be more effectively managed by sometimes coaching your manager about how to work with you. Some institutions are looking at doing this in a mentoring, raw material from mentors. So sort of corporate environment, you assign somebody a mentor. The mentor is always looking for things to do the mentoring task around. So having something that they can assign, is useful. I mentioned before, you can do this in a sort of faculty-student model where you say, look, there was a graduate seminar in psychology where all the graduate students were still working, and this material was used to say to each student, pick something from the collection, and then put out a discussion post about it, and we'll talk about it. And that's in fact that was the way that the topic we're going to go into in just a minute about joining an existing team came about across a couple of semesters of a course. That was the one question, the one topic that bubbled to the top as the most frequently self-selected subject for these graduate students. So they, for whatever reason, this must have been something that sparked their interest. And so they, time and again, people selected this one and worked through it and talked about it.
That's fascinating. And that whole idea about managing up is a skill set that we're never taught either. And it's so critical in the workplace. Being able to support and help my supervisors do a better job at getting things done is only going to benefit me. So whatever I can do to help them help me, that is going to make my life and my work that much more effective. So totally agree with that. How else do you see these pieces being used to grow strategic skill sets? I mean, we've talked about it being in kind of a team setting. We've talked about it being in an academic setting with the graduate psych students. What else do you see working?
Well, there's a weekly podcast that basically is me reading the article of the week. And people have told me that's great. You know, they're on their way to work, they're doing something, and they just want to grab
Smart.
a couple of minutes of professional development. There's a lunch and learn. I'm doing a thing called a power hour for a group that does fundraising for a university in California. So they have about 100 people in the organization, about 10 of whom are sort of new. But they all get together for what they call a power hour, and they bring in a speaker, uh, motivational or educational or whatever the need is, and they do that once a month. So they're launching this, and then the action item is to basically say, well, look, we're going to maybe license this material as sort of a digital library of articles, and you should go and serve yourselves. I mean, some of this material, I'll be frank, is for people who want to do the work of professional development, right? It is one of the cases where you're going to get out what you put in. If you skim everything and don't spend the time to think about it and try to apply it, then you won't get very much out of it because you haven't put very much into it. And so one of the reading paths I suggest is you could just read it all quickly, find the things you like, and then go deeper on those. Or you can, focus on a particular subject, like let's say time management was important to you, you felt you weren't doing that. And that actually came up in another sort of anecdotal situation. Somebody was telling me that their child, whatever, was having meetings back to back to back every time, every hour, on the hour, they had another meeting, and they were beside themselves with trying to figure out how to function in, with that pace. There was no break between the meetings. And I suggested to them, which is one of the articles, that they consider what's called a 50-minute hour, 50. And the idea there is simply, just because it's conventional to start on the hour doesn't mean you have to do that. And you could actually meet for 50 minutes as policy so that everybody gets 10 minutes left to learn, to write notes, to take a bio break, whatever they need, get their head clear for the next meeting. So a simple thing like that, which has been around for a long time as a business idea, professional idea, that the cadence of every hour exactly to its completion is maybe not the most effective time management. And I would argue that almost every hour-long meeting could be done in 50 minutes. In fact, that's a good discipline, right, to try to do that. But that's some of the ways that the material is being used.
Okay. Well, I think that lunch and learn idea is super smart and effective. I've attended lots of lunch and learns in the past, and what I'm always looking for is something pretty quick to digest with my lunch and then be able to use it immediately without doing a whole lot of additional research and background development. So I think these are perfect for that. If you have a group of students for instructors that, I mean, really at any level of preparation to go into the workforce, this is a fantastic way to help them start to think about, what does that professional dialogue look like? And how do I want to present myself as a new professional coming into the workforce? And so these are things that I think education, certainly community colleges, but also 4 years and grad school are really thinking more about and talking more about. So this is a perfect way to help walk them through it without having to dedicate huge amounts of your curricular time to it. They're quick. I've used a couple of these pieces with a group of entrepreneurial women that I help facilitate. And Jeff and I wrote questions to go along with these, and I presented it kind of in a book club format, if you will. So divided the group in half, so each group got their own little article and set of questions. They were different topics, and the group loved them. They loved them, especially the one on 30, 60, 90. And in fact, And then the 30, 60, 90 has to do with goal setting. The group that didn't get the 30, 60, 90 and got to listen to the conversation of the 30, 60, 90 group after they had done some discussion and were debriefing, they were like, we want that article. We want to see those questions. We think we can probably use them in our own kind of personal development. So very impactful, quick and easy to use. It was um, for people who they didn't have to do any prep work coming into it. I mean, it's just a very smart approach to soft skills. And I like to describe it as kind of soft skills on steroids, if you will, because these are upper level kinds of skills that it's not just showing up. You got to be there. You got to show up. But what happens next? These are these kind of this next level discussions. You've written about a lot of topics. Lots are Many are pragmatic and have applicable discussion points. So, which topic are we going to talk about today? I know you were going to pick one for
Right.
us, and
So I'll focus on one, but maybe we can, gently visit a couple others there too.
yeah.
The one I thought we would do is about joining an existing team, because as I alluded to earlier, that was one that had been very popular with graduate student cohort. And as you said, there's over 200 of these. They will appeal to different people at different stages and so on, but you're guaranteed to find some that resonate with your current situation. And then it's nice to see what might be coming and then be prepared. And that has to do with this topic I started with about how experience is nice to have, makes you more confident, makes you better able to engage. But let's talk a little bit about joining an existing team. So, and I think this will support the idea you mentioned, Maria, where it might seem just like a simple thing, but there's actually a higher level of thinking that can go around it. So the first thing is that you are joining the team, and it's important that it's an existing team in this discussion. There could be a new team, and if there's a team that has not yet been constituted, there's a whole set of dynamics, psychological and others, about how the team comes together and what its mission is and how people settle into a role and all of that. So you could say that's actually a different topic, which is how to fashion a team. This one is just a little different, which is the team already exists and you are the newcomer. And again, we'll make it simple and assume that it's not a whole bunch of you and it's not a huge team where your presence wouldn't have an impact. It's, let's say, analogous to you're a rock and roll band and you have 3 people, now you're going to have 4. You have 4 and you're going to have 5, right? So it's a small group, let's say fewer than 10, where a lot of work happens in the workplace, just as it does in school and in life. But let's say you're joining an existing team. So the first thing is recognize that it's an existing team. So with an existing team, I submit the first thing you need to do is sort of get the lay of the land, read the room, get an assessment of what's going on. Because the fact that it's an existing team means it has a culture. It has a way of doing things. It has a way of making decisions. For example, when you decide things, and this is the subject of yet another article, how do you decide? How do you decide you're going to decide? But who makes the decision, right? Is there a team leader and that's how it works? Or do you vote and do you have to be unanimous and things like that? But there's a culture. There's a way that you meet. There's a way that topics are raised. There's communication styles. There's formality, informality, the intensity of the meeting, how much preparation is expected, all that kind of thing. So there's quite a bit to the culture. And if you're going to participate fully, then you need to plug in to that culture, which starts from understanding what the culture is. Now, of course, because you're joining, the culture may shift due to your engagement with the group. But initially, you're coming in and working with the existing model. Let's not assume you're just going to come in and sort of fix the team. That's not the scenario. So teams generally, and this is again another article, but it's a common pattern, go through what's called storming, forming, norming, and performing. It's sort of something to know. Now, here's a great example of the difference between that experience and not. If you know the phrase storming, forming, norming, performing, sometimes SFNP, if you know that, that's sort of like inside speak. It's business language. Now, not everybody uses it, but some people do. And as you enter the workforce and begin to work in your career, you'll notice that there are people who've been in business for a long time, and there's you. And so your culture, which is, valid for you and your cohort and everything, may be distinct from cultures that were in place decades before. And all those people are working together. So it's important to recognize that even if you don't use this phrase, there's a generation of people who probably do and are more familiar with it. And that's part of the education, the technical literacy, to know that these types of phrases are used. And this is one of them, storming, norming, forming, norming, performing. Okay, so in the storming, you run around trying to figure out what you're doing. Then you form your group. Then you're performing, you're norming, and you're performing better. So just the idea that groups have a sort of a time built in when they have to pull together. And you see this in all the movies of sports teams where they're all getting together, and then all of a sudden they're all rowing well, or playing baseball well, or they're all running well, or whatever they're doing. And they had to get there. They didn't start that way. So this team has already gone through that. It's important to recognize that there's going to be a trust that has been built up among the people there. Of course, there could also be ill will that is already, there could be history. And you're plugging into all of that. So that's my first comment, that recognize that there's all that culture, there's all that stuff, and you need to know, what all that is. Now,
The other thing, let me just add to that, Jeff, just an observation too. As a team member, if I can recognize where my team is in the process of any given project, whatever the topic is, and there's a good chance that I can help alleviate or at least recognize that there's some frustration going on because we're still stormy or we haven't fully formed. So being able to understand that process will also gives me an advantage and in a way that I can help move the team forward potentially.
exactly. It's shorthand, right? If somebody says
Yes.
you're joining this group, you better watch out. They're still storming, right? Well, now you know what that means. And the shorthand is about efficiency, and it's about cultural acceptance and so on. So yeah, if you've been through that process and you join a team, you can say, looks like you guys are still storming, or I see you're already performing, and I recognize that I introduce change. And there's always a little bit of inertia, there's a little resistance to change, so you should always factor that in when you join an existing team, that you're going to have to go through that. So let's say this is analogous to one of the articles where I set up the fact, okay, this is what happens, and you're there. So what are the tools that you might use to kind of understand better what's going on? So one thing I do, and these are things that you might not think about immediately when you're joining a team, but I submit that they're interesting. One is to find out if the team wanted you, right? Did they ask for you? And that's actually even finer. Did they ask for anyone? Yes or no? And then among all the people who could have been asked to join, did they want you or not? So if they didn't want anybody, in fact, they said, don't give us anybody, well, that's important to know. And maybe they wanted somebody, but they didn't get who they wanted, they got you, which, again, is something to think about. So it's good to understand, right? Did they want anybody? Did they want more people than they got? Are you sort of a consolation prize? And so on. And even, were they given input into that decision, right? Did the manager come in and say, I'm giving you, Jeff, I'm giving you Maria. Or did they say, hey, how can I help? And the team said, we would like our team to expand. And in fact, we would like Maria. We don't want anybody else in particular, but she brings the skills, that we really want. So that's something you should, pause and consider. And then you should also think about whether you're an addition or a substitution. So the dynamics are a little different there. If you're added to the team, well, now everybody's going to adjust in a particular way to the fact that the load will be distributed. Not everybody wants their load distributed for them, right? Sometimes somebody's role is going to change because you've been introduced. And they might like that, they might not. So that's something that you need to recognize. Now, if you're doing a substitution, meaning somebody's leaving and you're being put in, well, that's again a different dynamic. Did they like the person? Possibly more than you that's being, transferred somewhere else. Did they not like the person and are happy and, all of that type of thing. So that's another thing to think about. And then what does, sort of the baseline of the organization look like before you join? And I'm a big fan, another article about establishing baselines, establishing what are the conditions before you entered. So you want to understand that, because what does success look like? And I ask this many times. What does success look like with you joining this team? How will we know if you joining this team worked, right? You could say, well, I'm just joining the team. And somebody says, well, what's the team going to look like after you're there? What effect will you have? You'll say, well, I don't know what the team is doing. I don't know where they are. I don't know how to measure the success or failure of joining the team. So again, something to think about. Now, you might ask the person who assigned you. So this is back to coaching your manager. Hey, you're putting me on this team. How do you characterize the team now? What are the key performance indicators or other measures of the success of the team today? How do you define success in terms of my introduction into this team? How will we know? Because that may go into my annual evaluation and ultimately my career trajectory and things like that. So you want to do stuff like that. You want to know a little bit about the relationships of the people in the team. Obviously they've been on the team together, but is there chemistry between them that you need to know about? Maybe some people on the team, for better or worse. And you want to know how your entry is going to affect decision making and all this other culture. There may be things where it's you vote on decisions, and now you're a new vote, and so that changes the dynamics. And back to this whole idea of roles may now overlap or be ambiguous because you've entered. And again, a good manager will see that coming, right? They have the experience. They know putting somebody in means everybody has to kind of adjust, and they can look ahead to that. So those are some of the tools that I give you, so that you've reflected on this. You said, oh, I guess there is more to joining a team than I realized. Maybe I'll think ahead. Maybe this will help me inventory the teams I can ask to join, right? All this type of stuff about career development that can come from now having thought through this more carefully. I can ask, what could possibly go wrong, right? Maybe I want to join a highly effective team because I will learn how to be on a highly effective team, and that will make me highly effective. Maybe I want to be able to diagnose teams that have problems and I want to stay away. I may be asked, hey, we have a few different teams, just like different projects. Do you have a preference for the one you want to join? So those are the kinds of things that I hope they would bubble up those thoughts and you would practice thinking about it. And so that may make you better able to navigate your career, accelerate you towards your goals, avoid pitfalls. Even if today you're not being asked to join any team. And that's the idea that when that situation comes about, you've already got this intellectual muscle memory about, hey, I'm not gonna respond immediately. I know I have to assess where I'm going, and I have to ask some questions directly, or at least consider them, with my own resources before I respond, rather than just say, "Oh, sure, sounds like a great idea, joining that team."
Yeah, a lot of stuff in here that really we are not asked to consider before entering the workforce, and even while we're in the workforce. Sometimes these kinds of steps can create stumbling blocks for us. If I have the opportunity to think it through beforehand, I may be able to avoid some of those stumbling blocks, which is really the purpose behind this collection. You talk about a couple of other things too, like some other strategies, thinking about developing expectations that are reasonable, like how long it will take me to fit in. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, well, and these are themes that I stress across the article. So one is, that you should have baselines, that you should define what success looks like, that you should have a way of establishing that, criteria for that, sometimes called key performance indicators, but they can just be a way that you're going to define success and failure. And a lot of the stuff I do is to talk about not only what can go right, but what can go wrong, right? To help you think through sort of the various sides of, an issue. There's also, well, let me give you an example. Let's say you join a group and the group didn't really want you, and so on. So you don't have trust. Uh, they are initially not, let's say, they didn't want you, and maybe not you personally, but they didn't want anything. So what do? I mean, you're thrust into the situation. Well, one thing you can think about is, if you contribute as much as you will be allowed to, if you do good work, over time, you will earn trust. People will see you as a contributor. This is the sort of just keep swimming strategy, right? You just do your job to the best of your ability, and you hope that over time you'll be there. You engage as much as you can. You recognize that there's a resistance to change, that there's a resistance to maybe some roles that have been shifted, and then hopefully you'll become a full member. But setting expectations, having a sort of an approach, looking before you leap, but then actually leaping, not being sort of paralyzed in indecision. Those are all dynamics that I think, again, experience makes you better at knowing to do those kinds of things. When you're first thrown into workplace situations, a lot of times you're just overwhelmed with all the new things, new kinds of people. Maybe you've never worked with people whose ages and experiences are so different, and their tenure at the organization is so much longer than yours, and these kinds of things, which in sort of a school situation, which is mostly what people have before they enter the workforce, everybody's sort of the same age. They've had the same body of experience, and they rise year after year after year, and then you're thrown out into the workplace. Whether you finished high school and are getting into the workplace now, or you go through college, or however you arrive at this point, you were always kind of a cohort. You were always together. Well, now you have people who may have been in the organization, for 20 years, and it's a new experience. They're sort of your colleague, sort of your peer, sort of not, and that kind of thing. So I think there are these patterns of setting expectation, good communication with your manager, measurement, quantifiable results where you can get it. Those types of things. Scenario, gaming out scenarios is a lot of what these articles have in common.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And I think one of the advantages of this collection, Jeff, is that you have taken some pretty complicated kind of psychological models and have pared them down into this easy to absorb information in a pattern, and with the ability to use it quickly, kind of use it to spark discussion and consideration, which I think is which is brilliant. So we've talked about joining an existing team, and there's a lot to that that nobody really tells you about. Are there a couple of other topics that you can share with us so we have a sense for what the larger collection looks like?
Yeah, let's do that. So one, which you alluded to earlier, was this concept of the 30, 60, 90-day plan. So, and first, let me say that using, say, a month, 2 months, 3 months out is maybe it's common. It may be relevant to your industry, but it may not, right? You may do things on a daily cadence where you have to plan what are you going to do in the next hour? What are you going to do in the next few hours? And so on. Or it could be even longer, right? What are we doing this year? What are we doing next year? But the idea is there's some kind of, we'll call it the short planning period, the medium planning period, and the longer planning period. And it is healthy, I believe, to get into the habit of deciding what do you think you can accomplish in that period. It's about expectation setting, effective communication with your manager. What do you expect me to do? How am I going to be judged? And the idea is, in the nearest term, your knowledge is pretty good about what's going to happen. So let's think about the weather. We know about the weather in the next 5 minutes. We can be pretty good about guessing that. And we can plan for that. But we don't maybe know so much about the weather next week, and certainly maybe not several weeks down the road. So there are situations where you kind of know the situation in the immediate term, but maybe not as much in the medium and the long. So let's say you develop a plan for in this case, 30 days out. This is where I am. This is what I'm pretty high confidence I can do in 30 days. So you develop that plan. How you're going to measure it, what success and failure might look like, and so on. And then you say, well, 60 days, I know a little less, but I still can say something. And I think that generally, if the 30-day works, this is where we'll be at the end of 60 days, and then this is what we can accomplish 90 days, right? So let's say you do that, and then you meet with your manager or your team after 30 days or near the end of the 30-day process, and you see where you are. And you say, okay, well, we were good, we were not, we were effective at achieving our goals, or we weren't. Now we're going to take that former 60-day period and we bring that forward. So it's like a rotation. So we take what was the 60-day plan and we make that the new 30-day plan. We take the former 90-day plan, we make that the new 60-day plan, and we do something for where we want to be in 90 days. And this is done all the time in business, every quarter, every month, every week, however the model is. But you're always planning for the short, medium, and long term, however defined. You're evaluating where you were, you're kind of rotating in the next, or sort of shifting in the next planning segment. And I think that pattern, that discipline is good. It definitely goes to measuring productivity. It can definitely help you when you come to, say, an annual review and people say, what did you do this year? And you don't want to have to just remember, you've got your plans and you've been in constant communication with your manager about where you need to do, what you need to work on, how you're doing stuff like that. So I think the discipline of the 30, 60-day plan is good. And I'll go further than that. Let's say you have a 30, 60, 90 kind of in your head, but your manager has one also. So you could say to your manager, I know what my 30, 60, 90-day plan is, but I'm curious if your understanding of what I'm supposed to be doing matches my understanding. Because if I'm not doing what you think I should be doing, we have a problem, and I want to be aligned, because alignment is another key thing to business success, aligning with your managers, making them look good and all of that, but making sure that you're doing what you should be doing, setting the right priorities and so on. So as an exercise, you could say, hey, I'll write down my 30, 60, 90 goals. You write down what you think they are, and you could exchange them. And you obviously could do this with your peers too. So if you become a manager, you can use this technique. You can say to people, hey, I think you're supposed to be doing this, but is this what you think you're supposed to be doing? Not that I want your opinion. I just want to make sure that we're aligned. So I raise that as a example practice You might not think to do that, but it can head off a lot of confusion where you say, I thought I was supposed to be working on this, and you discover that your team or your manager or the business partner you have or the international office that you collaborate with thought you were doing something else. So that's about making sure that the whole organization at varying levels of detail is sort of on the same page. And we're going to go into that's one of the ones that's posted to SkillsCommons. But I think those are good. And remember, this is a tool for you to communicate with your coworkers and your management about what you're doing. But this whole idea of how you're managed leads into another topic that I thought we would talk about called adaptive leadership. And the basic idea there is, again, kind of obvious at the first level. You don't want to manage everyone in your organization with the same approach. You'd like to treat everybody fairly and equally and so on, but they may not be in the same situation, and so you may not want to handle that quite the same way. And so I suggest, and this is again one of the tools I use a lot, very simple thing called a 2x2, right? So imagine 2 columns, 2 rows, 4 boxes, and let's take a case of someone who is motivated and skilled, who is working for you or working with you. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're the manager looking at the people who are working for you, or you're looking at your peers or potential business partners, wherever it is. But let's say you're both motivated, you're excited, and you're competent or skilled. So that's one box. But now let's say you're motivated, but you don't have a lot of skill. You're new, so on. So that occupies another box, right? You're in the same level of motivation, but in one case you had skill, in one case you didn't. Now in the other case, you're unmotivated, but you're skilled. So right now you're kind of checked out, but you do have a lot of skill. And then in the 4th box, you have the person who is neither motivated nor skilled. So as a manager or teammate, you want to think about this. Well, would I approach every interaction with these, let's say, simplistically 4 different box occupants the same way? And I think you would realize, no, you wouldn't, right? If somebody is motivated and skilled, you can probably just let them do what they want to do, and they're probably going to do a good job, and there you go. If somebody is neither motivated nor skilled, well, this is going to require quite a bit more work, more supervision, more skills, more hands-on training, tighter supervision. Well, let's say somebody is skilled, but they're not motivated. Well, you're going to have to maybe figure out why. Maybe they're not working on a problem that interests them anymore. Maybe they want to feel more part of a team. Maybe they'd like you to jump in and be shoulder to shoulder with them, and you could build some, team spirit. But they're skilled. So it's not that they can't do the work, but maybe they're just not in the right place. Maybe they have something going on outside the work context that's affecting them. But you know that what you do with them, say, you wouldn't do with somebody who was motivated and skilled, who might sort of leave alone. And now you might have somebody who's motivated, but they're not yet up to skill. Well, they'll probably accept a certain amount of extra coaching and guidance and so on the details of the work that you wouldn't do for somebody who already had the skill. So the whole point there is, first, using a tool like a 2x2, which I suggest in other places, to just categorize things, bin them, make them easier to communicate what you're talking about and what you're dealing with. Like you say, we could have high sales in good economic conditions, or low sales in good economic conditions, or high sales in poor economic conditions, that kind of pattern. It comes up a lot. And it's a way to sort of corral or wrangle what's going on. But my point is that from a leadership perspective, and leadership and management are similar, but not identical. But the idea is you want to know who you're managing and who you're leading, and try to meet them where they are rather than where you might wish them to be, and then help them get to where you would like them to be. And just the idea that you that 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 this exists as a pattern. So again, you're new on the job, you don't realize yet perhaps the challenge that your manager has. You're just starting to work. Well, they have to manage a whole group of people and they have to figure out what skills do you have and how motivated are you. And they may or may not adjust their leadership style, their management style to you. Maybe you need to help them. That's the managing up model, and say, look, um, I have the skill that you need, but I'm currently feeling unmotivated, but this is how I think I might become more motivated. Or I don't have the skill, but I'm really eager to learn. So please help me on the skill side. But you don't have to worry, I'm all in. So you can help other people understand kind of where you are. So that's just a quick look at, we talked about joining the existing team, and then we kind of did a shorter version on another one of these. And all the sort of surrounding verbiage that I've offered isn't in there, right? This is only page and a half, 2 pages. But all the content's there, the leading questions, the summary, the suggested things. And what you're supposed to do is, either through self-study or mentors or talking to your peers, dig into these things and ask. They're kind of a starting point for that process. And then when you have the experience, you'll, at least I would like to believe, be more confident, more poised, able to communicate more effectively, and hopefully exhibit, management potential, executive potential, or if that's not what you want, at least you'll be seen as a highly effective person in the role. Not everybody wants to manage. I understand that, but you will be, I think, seen as more up to speed, more able to engage than other young people, where the expectations are low, because frankly, nobody expects you to have any experience yet. That's why you're coming in, as a young person in terms of, experience in the industry. So the expectations are generally low. You're not supposed to know very much, but this will help you look like you're more on the ball.
You say that I know when you developed this, it was really about bringing new talent into the workforce and that kind of thing. But I definitely see, even with just these couple of examples that you've shared, excuse me, how um, this is really good conversation for established management.
Oh, yeah.
This builds leadership out of managers. So to become a strong leader, demonstrating and promoting these skill sets in others is critical. And so that's why I like to call it soft skills on steroids, because it's not just about being that brand new employee. It can also spread into other areas.
Yeah,
So you have, oh, sorry, go ahead,
I
Jeff.
was just going to say, yes, it's, I did sort of position the material as for the early career, so maybe the first 5 years, but there's certainly plenty to think about at any stage. Um,
So you have a website, you've got books on Amazon. Tell us a little bit about where to find some of those things. And then we're going to go take a look at Skills Commons, where the shelf is actually located now. And we have a collection of content there for people to take. It's open, so free. But let's talk about the collection that you have now and where they can all be found.
right. So as you mentioned, the material, so I collected these materials, I wrote them out as actually emails, and then I turned them into documents and cleaned them up and had an index and all the things that you do to turn it into a book. And that's a collection of a couple of hundred, 220 something, that's bound and available on Amazon, and it's in print and Kindle form. There's also the podcast, which is one article a week, basically read to you. I did take a subset of 50 articles, which the main book is called Strategies for the Workplace, but I did take 50 out and calling it Getting Ready for the Workplace. And those are ones that I think are particularly suited to people in college. We don't have to be in college, but the idea is you're getting ready for the workforce, but you're not there yet. Could even conceivably be relevant in high school. You'd be in a technical college. You could have left the workforce and coming back, all kinds of scenarios. But it's really stuff that doesn't take as much time on the sort of the business topics that you wouldn't come up with yet, like some of the managing and things about sales and international issues and collaboration with business partners and other topics that just are less likely to be relevant. But there's a lot of sort of foundational material. So let's say I had 150 more advanced topics and then 50 more introductory ones. And so that's actually bound separately as a separate offering. And some institutions have looked at licensing the material as just discrete, say, PDFs or voice recordings and putting that in an institutional library. And you can find out all about that on my website, which is strategiesfortheworkplace.com. And so that's a place to go for all of that. You can find out what podcasts are, because there's one for the basic and one for the longer work. And then you can contact me, and I'm at strategiesfortheworkplace@gmail.com. So those are things you can do. The podcast is free. The book is not, but it's inexpensive, certainly affordable, which is part of the whole SkillsCommons community, is to find open educational resources or resources that are sort of nominal cost. I'm at the end of my career, so certainly looking at this as part of giving back to the community that has been good for me. And we will probably do a couple more of these webinars, depending on how people like them. And we did take two of the articles in particular, the 30-60-day planning article and the adaptive leadership article, and put them into SkillsCommons and added in the think-abouts that you discussed earlier, where we pose questions for further consideration, group work, that type of thing.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And Rick Lumadou, who we consider the content specialist for SkillsCommons, has opened up the page within SkillsCommons. We call this a project shelf. And we've loaded two of these pieces. There's the adaptive leadership and the 30-60-90. And Rick, you just want to click into one and so people can kind of take a look. So there's a little abstract. It tells you, a few details about it. But if you look to the left, you can see that there are files that you can actually download and use yourself. So here is the PDF, and you can just download that and use it in your workplace or with a group of people that you're facilitating, et cetera, the way that I did with that entrepreneurial group. And you can see that they're pretty short and pretty easy to manage. And the whole collection is similar to this. So short, easy to digest, easy to manage, not arduous. They don't feel like assignments. It feels like, interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's the way I feel like it all comes across, in my opinion. Just a little bit of background about SkillsCommons. It's the world's largest repository of open educational resources and workforce development. It was developed under a $1.9 billion initiative under Department of Labor about in 2013 is around the time that it came about. And it has content that spans across sectors, with healthcare and advanced manufacturing and IT being the largest groups of collection. Anything in SkillsCommons, everything in SkillsCommons is openly licensed with a Creative Commons licensing, which means that you can download and take that with you, rewrap it with your own logo, we ask that you give attribution back to the originator, and we are very happy to show you how to do that at any time. And all you have to do is to reach out to support at skillscommons.org and support at skillscommons.org. And we are happy to spend time talking more about this tool, Skills Commons, and how to, and Rick, would you mind, here we're on the landing page, would you show us how to find Jeff's project shelf? So typing in Jeff's name, Jeffrey Kahn, and there it is. And we will be posting a link to this recording. We're also going to separate portions of the recording to allow a few highlight points, and we'll be sharing those out. But these are the kinds of things that you'll be able to easily and openly access within the collection on Skills Commons. Okay, is there anything else you wanted me to say about that, Rick?
Nope, I think that's it, Maria.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, Jeff, it's been fascinating, and every time I spend time talking with you, I learn more every single time. I can tell you that that is consistent and true. So, Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to share in closing?
No, obviously, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this. It's been kind of an interesting experience, sort of, as I said, kind of at the end of my career here, to have an opportunity to distill a lot of experience across a lot of roles and a lot of pieces of the industry. And I was involved in many different things, as you alluded to at the beginning. And you learn these things and you would like to pass them on. I benefited from having some very helpful people early in my career. I realize that not everybody will have that, but if you have, it's great and you should treasure it. And if you don't, well, maybe some of the stuff that I've put together, can help and make you, happier, more effective in your work life, and a better leader, a better manager, a better coworker, as a result from having just thought about some things and being a little bit more ready, so that when the situation arises, you can sort of draw from a deeper pool of thought and experience than you might otherwise have without having been exposed to this material. So that's my goal. I hope it is adopted widely and people benefit.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for sharing so openly with us. We appreciate that. And we will be in touch with ways to better access this content through Skills Commons and through Jeff's website, strategiesfortheworkplace.com. Thank you again, everybody.